So we, of course, saw what happened in Maui. We watched the dustification of cars, wildfires. Nothing blue burnt, by the way. We've watched Hurricane Helene, which set this unprecedented track, by the way. This thing went from west directly east, which no hurricane in history has ever taken that path before. It was unprecedented in that way. And then all of a sudden it makes a turn and swoops toward the north, where it makes it all the way through like the Rocky Mountains and into western North Carolina, where people are still without homes. They got a $700 loan. FEMA was blocking people. The government was standing in the way of personal private citizens spending their personal and private money on fuel for helicopters as they were going in there, and they were saving pregnant women. They were saving elderly people. They were blocked under the threat of arrest if they went in there. No. The government's got all this. They were kicking people out. They didn't want anybody to see any of it, just like Maui. All of these so-called natural disasters that are displacing people and threatening their lives. And now what we're seeing in California are these fires just ravaging everything, just smashing through. Hundreds of people, possibly thousands, are dead. Tens of thousands are being evacuated. Possibly hundreds of thousands or even millions of them are being evacuated. They're losing their homes. I mean, it looks like hell on earth in California. And on the mainstream corporate media networks, you see them talking about how there's like this division line. No. The fires aren't any further west than this area. But then you look, and yes, they are. And we have people on the ground. So why are they denying that? Why are they saying that they're restricted or confined to a certain area when they're not? The footage that's coming out of here, I mean, look at this stuff. This footage is like literally an apocalyptic war zone. People are losing everything. They're dying. They're losing their children. They're losing their family members. They're losing their pets. We saw videos of people trying to save horses and walking them out. And by the way, beautiful property. All of this is beautiful property. And then when you go back to Maui, you have to ask yourself, if these fires and this wind were so strong and so deadly and so damaging, and if homes could be completely wiped off of their geographical location, talking homes here, right? Completely obliterated, gone, dustified. Nothing left. But strangely, none of the landscaping, none of the brushes, none of the hedges, none of the bushes or trees were disturbed at all. As a matter of fact, the lawns in many cases were still perfectly green, thriving. So yeah, we called that some sort of a laser-directed energy weapon attack. Of course, that's what it is, because your government wants to kill you and then they want to steal your land. Dane Wigington has been paying close attention to what's happening in California. Am I being like just a weird, cracked-out conspiracy theorist that's throwing hyperbolic things out here to just try to shock people into post-engagement, or do you believe that this is manufactured as well?
What we can say, Stu, is that there's nothing natural about this kind of firestorm behavior, period. And we cannot separate climate engineering from this issue. It's core to this issue. What is setting that, regardless of the source of ignition, I want to decipher that. What is setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity? And that clearly is climate engineering. Stu, I had a conversation with Governor Newsom in his office years ago, presented data to him on exactly what's happening right now. And I stated this would happen if climate engineering was allowed to continue. I presented to Newsom and his top aide, and of course they've done nothing but pretend this is all just some natural consequence of nature.
And when you're talking about climate engineering, let's be specific. Are you talking about climate trails, chemtrails, spraying our skies, seeding the clouds?
Climate engineering, geoengineering, sprayed particulate dispersions. That's what's happening in our skies. It's not condensation. We have up-close film footage of these aircraft at altitude, nozzles visible, dispersing. We took a NOAA flying lab to altitude. Geoengineeringwatch.org took a NOAA flying lab to altitude. That's a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration lab. Top scientists in it. We sampled what these heavy aircraft were emitting. And one of the primary elements, Stu, is aluminum nanoparticles. Aluminum nanoparticles are such an effective incendiary that they're used in demolitions, military demolitions, and that incendiary dust is on everything. That's not debatable or disputable, period. So bottom line is, from surface zonal wind flows to the drying out of the landscape to the coating of that landscape with incendiary dust. And again, the source of ignition, separate subject completely. What is setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity? And that is climate engineering, period. We have an engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for much more data on this issue. And I'll leave it with this, Stu. We found a U.S. military document titled Forest Fires as a Military Weapon. It's posted at geoengineeringwatch.org. Within that document, it describes exactly the type of preparation to burn a region that we see happening in places like Southern California, Canada 2 years ago, and other regions. That's not a coincidence. And we know climate engineering creates exactly these conditions. So the bottom line is there's no legitimate discussion about these fires or the deep freeze in Texas, too. I'm sure you're watching that. The flash chemical freeze in Texas right now while Southern California is incinerating.
Yeah.
All of these issues are directly connected to climate engineering, period.
The entire country is colder than hell right now, actually. I know in my other home state of Florida, right now on the West Coast, in Tampa, it's 32 degrees, according to Carlos Cortez, who we'll talk to actually momentarily. And then, of course, I have other family and friends, a lot of close acquaintances in Florida. It's colder than hell there right now, relatively speaking, of course. I mean, what is going on? Why is it cold across the whole country? What is the purpose of these fires? If they are being done intentionally, why?
Again, we can speculate on the agendas and objectives, but the fact that these fires are absolutely not natural. I grew up in Southern California, right at the head of the Santa Ana Wind Canyon, the bottom of the Cajon Pass. I grew up there. We had never had anything like this then. Bottom line is we can speculate on agendas and objectives, but the fact that this is climate engineering, including the surface flash freezes, go 1,000 feet up off the deck in Florida, and the temperatures will likely raise about 30 degrees. This is and we're hearing that from pilots, by the way. In fact, we recently heard from 2 military pilots, Stu, that fly private jets with very important people. They contacted geoengineeringwatch.org directly because their aircraft were forced into emergency auto descent from above 40,000 feet because the air was so warm, 45 degrees plus warmer than it should be, that the air was not dense enough to carry those aircraft. This is a chemical surface flash freeze, chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. And in creating that surface flash freeze, they create a lot of headlines that they want to utilize for different purposes. But the bottom line is this is a chemically nucleated material that flash freezes the surface, and we're testing that material. We're not guessing, Stu.
Who's actually carrying out this activity, doing the actual cloud seeding or spraying of the skies?
Well, all roads lead back in the U.S. to the DoD. Of course, nothing like this could happen without DoD involvement at the core. So when we're not going to hear about this, we're not going to have legions of whistleblowers. What happens to whistleblowers? They get locked up. Ask John Carrico, who blew the whistle on the illegal torture program, U.S. official. He was the only one to go to jail. We have an illegal federal gag order, Stu, on all National Weather Service and NOAA employees for all agency operations. I had a NOAA employee state to my face at a Marine lab on the U.S. West Coast, quote, "We all know this is going on. We have no First Amendment protection. We don't know what to do." So the bottom line is the public is asleep at the wheel, while climate engineering, aka weather warfare, in this case, winter weather warfare in the other parts of the country you just described, this is going on above our heads and the population's pretending it isn't happening. That needs to change because the ramifications of what's going on, and it's not just weather warfare, Stu. These elements they're using are toxic. Aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, surfactants, graphene, all toxic by themselves, more toxic when combined. And Stu, when we have polymer fibers and graphene in the mix, those are biological carrier platforms militarily. They're used to carry a pathogen from the clouds to the ground. What's that doing in our rain, and what other type of experiments are they conducting on us?
Well, none of it is good. I mean, obviously, there's a reason why everybody is sick constantly.
Yes.
The skies don't look the same at all. You can tell the difference between real clouds and fake clouds. There's constantly a haze over the West Coast. This has been going on for quite some time now. Geoengineeringwatch.org. What are people going to find there regarding these wildfires, and heavy air quotes for our radio listening audience, of course?
Search the engineering wildfire section, search the engineering winter section, and about all the fog, Stu. I'm sure you've heard about that everywhere. That's a direct result of chemical ice nucleating elements and the conditions they create when they're flash freezing an area that's been warm, and you create this chemical flash cold in the surface. It generates a lot of fog. And again, we know there's toxic elements in that fog, and there's likely many other elements we have not yet been able to identify. So the bottom line is this is all out weather and biological warfare, the consequences of which will be beyond what most dare to imagine. We need to deal with this, or all their causes or concerns will soon become moot. Everybody's needed to bring this issue to light, share credible data from a credible source. Geoengineeringwatch.org strives to be that credible source. Our only mission: stop what's happening in our skies.
So you mentioned on here, of course, the military-industrial complex. I'm just reading what's written here. Is the military-industrial complex insane enough to incinerate Earth's last remaining forests in order to achieve the objectives of the global controllers? The short answer is yes. So you're speculating about objectives there. We're looking at land grabs happening not just here in our country, but of course in the Middle East as well. Is that what this is about? Is this a big land grab of valuable property?
I would say the agendas go much deeper than that, because the ramifications of the current course that we are on are total. If we remain on this course, no one gets out alive, including the controllers. They can crawl into their bunkers temporarily, but they are destroying the planet's last remaining life support system. So in the case of the incineration of large swaths of forest, for example, in Canada, where we lost something like 71,000 square miles, not acres, 71,000 square miles, larger than the states of Florida or Georgia. In that case, that incineration appears to be a correlation with science study we found, Stu, that advocated for the intentional burning of northern latitude forests to put enough particulate matter in the air to mimic the temporary cooling effects of a volcano. That's peer-reviewed science study. It's in our engineering wildfire section. So again, from that to the Lahaina land grab or scouring land clean of any inhabitants, there are likely so many agendas being carried out. So we try not to speculate too deeply on that, but all of those agendas are nefarious, period. Climate engineering is all-out warfare in the populations. Without those populations, Stu, ever even knowing they're under assault, they can blame it on nature. The controllers can, and that's exactly what they do.
Well, they sure did need the lithium deposits.
Yes.
In western North Carolina.
Yes.
And in Maui, of course, we're watching the elites make really nice bids on beautiful property in Lahaina. And then, of course, in the Middle East, we see auctions actually happening, Palestinian land, beachfront, waterfront, beautiful property that's happening there. Taxpayers are funding all of this. We're funding our own demise.
Let's not forget the oil that's underneath, off the coast of Gaza, that was in their jurisdiction also. Large acknowledged oil deposits that are also being looted, plundered, and pillaged now that they've cleared out the native inhabitants, just like they did in the U.S. with the Native Americans. Stu, same scenario. And those that can't see that what's happening in the Middle East is absolute genocide for all the purposes you mentioned, including, again, hydrocarbon deposits underneath Gaza or Palestinian territory right on their coast. That's likely another factor in this equation, along with everything you mentioned. So yeah, it's not hard to see this if people open their eyes.
It all just seems to just line up so perfectly, where the people like you and I and the rest of our fellow Americans, and really citizens of the West, we end up either burned or displaced or targeted for rape if you're a child or a woman, or dead, or enslaved in some sort of a virtual or digital or financial prison camp. But yet when all of these things, this perfect storm comes together, the elite, the billionaires, they seem to just do just fine. They seem to really reap the benefits of all of these things. To me, that just doesn't seem very coincidental.
Stu, if everybody spoke out like you're speaking out, then we would be in a different situation. But unfortunately, the controllers, those who print the money, those who do things like genocide in the Middle East and everything else that we see happening around us, we just described, they couldn't do what they do without the active or passive support of the majority population. And that needs to change. So I salute your gloves off approach to all of these issues, your courage, and we're with you 100% at geoengineeringwatch.org, and we will continue to do our part.
It'd be a really interesting question to ask every single one of these so-called congressmen, these so-called elected representatives. A simple question, really. Do you stand with the American people and support them and care about them more? Or do you care about Israel more? I think we're going to do that.